In 1987, NASCAR had a problem. The Chevrolet Monte Carlo wasn't slippery enough for 200-mile-per-hour racing, so Chevy did what any desperate manufacturer would do. They built a street car nobody wanted to sell, a race car everybody feared. This is the story of the Monte Carlo SS Aerocoupe, the homologation special that dominated NASCAR, flopped in showrooms, and became a collector's item by accident. Let me paint you a picture. It's 1986. Dale Earnhardt is fighting for championships in a Monte Carlo that looks like a brick. Ford's Thunderbird is cleaning up on superspeedways because aerodynamics matter at NASCAR speeds. GM's engineers know they need an edge. But NASCAR's rules are clear. If you want to race it, you have to sell it. At least 200 street versions. Minimum. So Chevrolet went to the wind tunnel. They took the regular Monte Carlo SS, the car that had been selling reasonably well since 1983, and they gave it a makeover that would make it faster on track and uglier everywhere else. The solution was simple, but radical. Replace the traditional notchback rear window with a massive sloped fastback design. The Aerocoupe was born. It looked like a Monte Carlo that had gone through wind tunnel puberty. Different, dramatic, and designed for speeds most buyers would never reach. The rear window was enormous, wrapped around the C-pillars, created a profile that was part sports car, part science experiment. The trunk lid was shortened. The deck spoiler was integrated. Everything was optimized for one thing: reducing drag at racing speeds. The numbers told the story. The regular Monte Carlo SS had a drag coefficient of 0.375. The Aerocoupe dropped that to 0.365, about a 3% improvement. That translates to roughly 5 miles per hour at NASCAR superspeedway speeds. 5 miles per hour, that could mean the difference between victory lane and second place. But here's where things get interesting. Under that aerodynamic body was the same basic Monte Carlo SS that had been around since 1983. The GMG body platform, rear-wheel drive, body-on-frame construction, technology that traced its roots back to 1978. Power came from the high-output 5.0-liter V8, 305 cubic inches, carbureted, not the sophisticated tuned port injection system you'd find in the Camaro IROC sitting in the same showroom. Old-school carburetor, 2-barrel, simple, reliable, and not particularly powerful. 180 horsepower, that's what you got. Let that sink in. The 1987 Mustang 5.0 we covered a few weeks ago, 225 horses. The Camaro IROC-Z with the 5.7, 230 horsepower. Even the Pontiac Firebird formula we just discussed, same 230 horses. The Monte Carlo Aerocoupe was bringing a knife to a gunfight, and torque wasn't much better, around 240 pound-feet, sent to the rear wheels through a 4-speed automatic transmission, the THM 700R4, a solid gearbox, but not exactly performance-oriented. This was a car built to cruise at 70, not blast to 60. The suspension was the EFF 41 Sport package, standard on all Monte Carlo SS models. Upgraded shocks, stiffer springs, larger sway bars. It handled decently for a 3,500-pound G-body coupe. But decent wasn't exactly a selling point when your competition was lighter, sharper, and faster. Performance? 0 to 60 in approximately 9 seconds. Quarter-mile times in the mid-16s. Numbers vary slightly by test source, but the point stands. It wasn't fast. The Fox body Mustang was running low 14s. The IROC-Z with the 350 was in the high 13s. The Monte Carlo Aerocoupes was fighting yesterday's war with yesterday's weapons. So how did Chevrolet expect to sell these things? Simple. They didn't. In 1986, GM built exactly 200 Aerocoupes, the absolute minimum NASCAR required for homologation. All 200 were identical. White exterior, burgundy interior, no options, no variations. Built at Arlington, Texas, then shipped to Cars and Concepts in Brighton, Michigan for the Aerocoupe conversion. Those 200 cars served their purpose. They qualified the design for NASCAR. Dale Earnhardt and the Chevrolet teams had their aerodynamic advantage. Mission accomplished. GM could have stopped right there. But something unexpected happened. Customers actually wanted them. Not because they were fast, not because they were practical, but because they were different, rare, connected to NASCAR. In that weird way that 80s America loved homologation specials, the Aerocoupe had appeal. So for 1987, Chevrolet opened up production, built 6,052 Aerocoupes, offered them in multiple colors: white, black, gray, burgundy, with various option packages, T-tops, power everything, premium stereos. You could actually order one the way you wanted it. Production moved to Pontiac, Michigan. Cars and Concepts still did the final Aerocoupe conversion. But this was now a real model, not just a NASCAR compliance exercise. The base price was $14,838, about $1,500 more than the regular Monte Carlo SS. In late 80s money, that difference was nearly 20% of the car's base price. Enormous. You were paying a significant premium for that sloped rear glass and NASCAR connection. Whether it was worth it depended entirely on what you valued. And here's the problem. Most buyers didn't value it. That aerodynamic advantage that mattered at Daytona? Completely irrelevant at highway speeds. The drag coefficient improvement only made a real difference above 120 miles per hour. Speeds that were not just illegal, but dangerously so on public roads. You were paying extra for technology you'd never use. Meanwhile, the Camaro IROC-Z was sitting right there in the same Chevrolet showroom. Lighter, faster, better handling, more modern engine technology, similar price. If you wanted a performance Chevy in 1987, the choice was obvious. And buyers made that choice. IROC production, nearly 39,000 units. The Aerocoupe, 6,000. The Monte Carlo Aerocoupes wasn't competing with Ford and Dodge. It was competing with its own corporate siblings, and losing, badly. The regular Monte Carlo SS, the notchback version, was outselling the Aerocoupe by a wide margin. Buyers wanted the Monte Carlo name and the SS badge, but they didn't want to pay extra for a rear window that only made sense at racing speeds. Let that marinate for a moment. But on the track, different story. Completely different story. The Aerocoupe dominated. Dale Earnhardt won multiple races. The aerodynamic advantage was real. At Daytona and Talladega, where speeds hit 200 miles per hour, that 5-mile-per-hour edge mattered. Chevrolet teams had the car they needed to compete with Ford's slippery Thunderbird. The irony was thick. No amount of wind tunnel magic could hide the fact that underneath, it was still a 1978 Buick with a mullet. The G-body platform was ancient by 1987 standards. The engine technology was old school. The whole package felt dated compared to the Fox body Mustang's modern refinement, or the IROC-Z's Corvette-derived tech. But with that fastback glass, it could win at Talladega. That's all NASCAR cared about. And that's exactly what GM delivered. A car built for NASCAR rules, not customer satisfaction. The Aerocoupe was honest about its mission. It wasn't pretending to be a great street car. It was a homologation special, built to minimum quantity, sold to whoever would buy it, raced to maximum effect. By the end of 1987, the writing was on the wall. The Monte Carlo itself was dying. The entire rear-drive G-body platform was being phased out. GM was moving to front-wheel drive for almost everything. The Lumino was coming. Modern, efficient, practical. Everything the Monte Carlo wasn't. But here's the plot twist nobody expected. The Aerocoupe didn't just fail. It failed so hard that it accidentally became collectible. For 1988, the final year of the rear-drive Monte Carlo, there was no Aerocoupe. The option was quietly discontinued. Production stopped in December 1987. Total Monte Carlo production for '88? Just over 30,000 cars. The nameplate was retired. After 18 years, the last rear-wheel drive V8 Monte Carlo rolled off the line. An era ended. Not with celebration, just ended. So, what's the legacy? On paper, the Aerocoupe looks like a failure. 6,000 units across 2 years. Outsold by the regular Monte Carlo. Demolished by the IROC. Ignored by buyers who wanted actual performance instead of NASCAR cosplay. A premium-priced car that delivered almost nothing useful on the street. Still with me? Good. Because it gets interesting. Today, those same Aerocoupes that dealers struggled to move, they're collectible. Values range from around $15,000 to over $30,000 depending on condition and mileage. Low-mileage examples have sold for significantly more. The rarity that made them hard to sell new makes them desirable now, especially the 1986 models. Only 200 built, all identical. That's Superbird territory in terms of production numbers, and they represent something important in automotive history. The last gasp of NASCAR homologation rules that actually required street cars. By the 90s, NASCAR was moving toward pure race cars with production body shapes. The connection between showroom and track was dissolving. The Aerocoupe was the end of an era, when manufacturers still had to sell what they raced. It was also the last rear-wheel drive V8 Monte Carlo. After '88, when the name returned in '95, it was front drive, V6 powered, a completely different animal. The Aerocoupe represented the death of the traditional American personal luxury coupe, body on frame, rear drive, V8 up front, big, simple, old school. That formula died with the G-body. So was it a failure? Depends on how you define success. As a street car? Absolutely. As a sales success? Disaster. As a NASCAR weapon? Perfect. As a homologation special? It did exactly what it was supposed to do. Built to minimum quantity, raced to maximum effect. The street version was just a necessary evil to get the race version approved. And that's probably the most honest assessment. The Aerocoupe wasn't designed for you. It was designed for Dale Earnhardt, for NASCAR teams, for wind tunnels and super speedways. If you bought one expecting Mustang performance or IROC handling, you were buying the wrong car. But if you bought one because you loved NASCAR and wanted that connection, you got exactly what you paid for. A piece of racing history, with license plates. Take a moment. Breathe. We're almost done. The 1987 Chevrolet Monte Carlo SS Aerocoupe. A commercial failure that became a collector's item. A street car nobody wanted that dominated on track. A homologation special that was honest about what it was, and suffered sales consequences because of it. Sometimes the most interesting cars aren't the successful ones. They're the weird experiments, the corporate compromises, the cars that tried to serve two masters and satisfied neither. Because sometimes the most interesting stories come from the cars that didn't quite work out. If you love forgotten GM experiments like this one, subscribe for more. This is Car Chronicles, where even commercial failures teach us more than corporate successes. Don't be the guy who paid extra for aerodynamics you'll never use.